So Keating was a captive of Michael Milken. Remember Drexel, Burnham Lambert, and the junk bond? Not a penny of Keating's money went into acquiring Lincoln Savings. All of it came from Milken, and it was done in the conventional way of greatly overfunding it so that he had Keating, as we would say in the vulgar fashion, by the short hairs. So, the way Keating responded to this benefit was that Lincoln Savings purchased a $1 billion portfolio of junk bonds from Drexel, Burnham Lambert. And as to this portfolio, Lincoln had zero control. It learned at the end of the day in a telex what it now owned. Now we have this pesky little thing called a rule that says when you make a loan, and buying a bond is making a loan to a corporation, you have to underwrite contemporaneously and show why that's a prudent investment. And since they had no involvement in the decision making, they had zero underwriting files for a $1 billion portfolio in a $5 billion shop. Now the examiners are obviously going to look at that. Not a problem. Arthur Andersen was already there as the statutory auditor. He simply hired them as consultants, whereupon they created tens of thousands of pages of documents, stuffed them into the files to look like contemporaneous underwriting documents. Meanwhile, this direct investment rule had a grandfathering clause, so he backdated thousands of documents, forged tens of thousands of signatures, and of course ordered the legal secretaries and paralegals to do it, gave them different colored pens and exemplars of how to do this. Anybody notice, by the way, that we're getting little gratuities at the end of our talks in plain brown wrappers with red tape around them and a red ink pen on top? I think this is really symbolic. Well chosen. Okay, so that was done, and it was also done with the attorneys. Keating deliberately put them in competition with each other. He threatened to sue Arthur Andersen when it resigned the account unless he got to write the letter. And their original letter resigning the account, which Blaine said that, Lincoln Savings was engaged in all this risky stuff, became an attack on the regulators and was used to help recruit the 5 senators who became known as the Keating Five. Right. Now I said, despite these things, the savings and loan crisis is remarkable for actually having substantive re-regulation. Remember, this is occurring under President Reagan, as in the government isn't the solution, the government is the problem, President Reagan. Right? And it's being run by a chairman of the agency who was a tax protester. He had this road to Damascus experience where he came back as a re-regulator, having seen all these frauds. So Keating, all by his lonesome, managed to get a majority of the members of the House of Representatives to co-sponsor a resolution calling on us not to go forward with re-regulation. He got Speaker Wright, and in our system, the answer to a trick question is the second most powerful elected official in America is the Speaker of the House, not the Vice President, not the Senate Majority Leader. He got Speaker Wright to hold hostage our request for additional funds to close the frauds, to extort favors for Vermin Savings, among others. Of course, we had the Keating Five, the 5 U.S. senators, who include Senator McCain, try to extort us on direct investment rule not to take enforcement action against Lincoln Savings. And by the way, Lincoln Savings' violation of this rule was over $600 million. The greatest violation in the history of the agency, and a violation of conduct always led to a catastrophic failure. Right? But that wasn't enough. The administration under Reagan also threatened to criminally prosecute the head of our agency for closing too many insolvent savings and loans. Right? And we kept on going. And we adopted regulation. We targeted because we understood this pattern of the control frauds. And so we looked and we sought to close the Lincolns and the Vernons when they were reporting they were the most profitable savings loans in America. You seen regulators doing things like that recently? No. And we recognized it had an Achilles heel, and that was growth, a Ponzi scheme has to grow very rapidly or die. So we restricted growth, and we killed every one of these Ponzi's. I channel the whistleblower. In addition to blowing the whistle on Henkel, one presidential appointee, blew the whistle on the successor, who removed our jurisdiction over Lincoln Savings, first time in the history of the United States, because we had recommended its closure. He did this in response to the pressure of Keating 5 and Speaker Wright. So he resigned in disgrace as a result of our testimony. And we blew the whistle on Speaker Wright. We were only a portion of what led him to resign in disgrace. So Keating twice hired private detectives to investigate me. Speaker Wright, one of his efforts to fire me was one of the suggested ethics charges by the House, independent counsel, effort to hire William K. Black type of thing. Keating sued me in my individual capacity for $400 million. And he wrote a memo, highest priority, get Black, kill him dead. So, yes, the problems exist in all these countries, but what's remarkable is the persistence, right? And the fact that these are elites, and we were able to get over 1,000 convictions of elite white-collar criminals. So, you can see a scandal that dimension, only 4 acts of corruption, formal corruption. Corruption wasn't much the story. More fundamentally, though, it got worse. And what we're seeing is that the ideology is the most devastating. The ideology that regulation is the enemy, that it's not necessary. That if we simply get rid of the government in the deans of law and economics and corporate law in the United States, Easterbrook and Fischel famously said, a rule against fraud is not necessary or even particularly important. Right? So they're saying, you don't need any prosecutors, you don't need any laws, you don't even need rules. Markets simply prevent it. How many people, if any, have seen the Frontline special, The Warning? It ran about 2.5 weeks ago. Okay, I highly recommend it. You can see it for free if you have access to the web. And Brooksley Born, who was the head of one of our agencies that's supposed to regulate commodities futures, proposed to regulate credit default swaps. These are the things that blew up AIG and much of the world economy, and may and will do so again, unless we deal with these things. She has a meeting with Alan Greenspan, who, by the way, was an aide to Lincoln Savings, who famously said Lincoln Savings posed no foreseeable risk of loss. It was the most expensive failure of the savings loan industry at $3.4 billion. Of course, $3.4 billion now sounds quaint. So, Brooksley Born is requested by Alan Greenspan to come over for a meeting. This is their first formal meeting. And Alan Greenspan says, really nice to meet you, but of course we're going to disagree about the regulatory philosophy. And she says, well, why? And he says, because you think we should regulate against fraud. That's how crazed the world became. Right? And it became that crazed in the context of the FBI warning in September 2004 that there was an epidemic of fraud. Despite an FBI warning that 80% of those fraud losses came when lender personnel were involved. So these are control frauds led from the top. No action was taken. And Alan Greenspan had unique powers in the United States. 80% of the non-prime loans in the United States were made by unregulated entities.